presentation of AIT.
Ready for a real challenge? Well, come along and travel the world. Our missions are tough and the issues are global. So pack light. We're about to take off.
How does the scarcity of an important natural resource affect people's daily lives? How is oil produced, distributed, and used? How have oil resources affected life in the United Arab Emirates? Who benefits from oil wealth in the UAE? How do the policies of the UAE and other governments affect oil resources? Don and I will be drilling for answers.
We don't want to be late for our flight.
Just hold on a second. We don't run out of gas either, do we? Besides, look at this as pre-trip research.
Research?
Absolutely. Gasoline comes from oil, and oil is the most valuable resource in the United Arab Emirates. So you see, research. Hold on, wait. If I get one more gallon in, we get a free car wash. Two of the most important natural resources in the world today are oil and fresh water. The United Arab Emirates contains some of the largest oil reserves in the world. But when it comes to fresh water, the UAE has a constant struggle to find enough for its 2.7 million residents. It's often called a land of contrast, and for good reason. Let's go take a look.
Welcome to Abu Dhabi, one of the United Arab Emirates.
Or UAE.
Or UAE. Thank you, Zach. As you can see, it's a warm, sunny January day here. It's probably a good thing we're not here in July. Otherwise, it'd be too hot to stand outside like this. Let's go to the map.
The UAE is located on the Arabian Peninsula, a region the media likes to call the Middle East, and geographers call Southwest Asia.
The UAE is surrounded by Saudi Arabia, Oman, Qatar, and the Arabian Gulf. It's a small country, about the same area as the state of Maine. And most of it is, well, desert. Sand, sand, and more sand. Everywhere you look with almost no rainfall. But you're thinking, hey, they're right on the Arabian Gulf. Plenty of water. But unless you like your water really, really salty, you probably don't want to take a drink. Not all the country is desert, though. To the north and east, there are mountains and areas that receive some precipitation during the cooler winter months. Not surprisingly, this region is where most of the cities have sprung up during the UAE's history.
We talked to Dr. Frauke Hurd Bey at the Cultural Foundation about the earliest inhabitants of this area. I asked her what this land was like when the first people arrived.
It is, in fact, the most desolate salt marshes, and there is no fresh water to be found, and of course very little precipitation because the hinterland is desert. The only precipitation you find on occasions is in the mountains. Now, what can people do on such in an area which is so scarcely endowed with the ordinary resources, particularly for people who have migrated to this area? The population which came to this part of the world was out of Central Arabia and out of Oman, were nomads. They always say that God has blessed them with two wonderful things, and that is the camel and the date palm, both of which are superbly suited for this climate. And the people here have really all their lives, in the past, been grateful to their maker for these two gifts. And indeed, looking after their camels brought people to this part of the world in the first place.
The migration of the Arab population to this area took several hundred years, but it was well established by the birth of Muhammad in the 6th century. Portuguese explorers arrived by ship at the end of the 15th century. They built forts along the Arabian coast and the East African coast to protect their trade routes. They were later replaced by the Dutch as the dominant European power in the area. Then, in the mid-18th century, the British Navy arrived. At the time, piracy was a big problem, particularly for European trading countries, with a number of local groups battling for control of the Straits of Hormuz, which linked the Arabian Gulf to the Arabian Sea and the Indian Ocean. The British formed a truce between the warring tribal groups. They became known as the Trucial States, and the area as the Trucial Zone.
During the 20th century, the Trucial Zone was made up into 7 sheikdoms, regions under the control of a ruler known as a sheikh. In 1971, the British left this area, and the 7 sheikdoms joined together to become the United Arab Emirates.
And what's an emirate?
An emirate is a region under the control of an emir, which is another word for an Arab ruler.
All right, Don, I'm impressed. You know your stuff. But we should talk about 1953.
I agree. 1953 was a very important year for the people living in this region. It was the year they made an important discovery beneath all this sand.
Oil! Black gold! Texas tea!
Zach.
Oil. It's the lifeblood of the modern world, fueling cars, trucks, airplanes, and countless other machines. It's used in making plastics and in 100 products people use every day, such as shampoo, soft drink containers, milk cartons, and even textbooks. The discovery of oil in 1953 changed this area forever, making it one of the richest in the world.
So this single geographic detail, sitting on top of millions of gallons of oil, was enough to completely change a country. Now, contrary to what Zach here thought before we left, all that oil doesn't grow on trees. It's found buried deep underground. How do they get it from the ground, and where does it go after that? To find out, let's talk to oil expert Mr. Frank Chemnitz. Shall we go, Zach?
Lead the way.
Why is this region so rich in oil?
To understand that, we have to go back a long, long time ago, millions of years ago, in fact, to when this area around us here was a sea. And in fact, the sea was very rich with marine life. Over the years, as the earth changed, that marine life died, settled to the bottom, and was covered with sediment. Over many, many, many years, that sediment became deeper and deeper, so this organic material was put under high pressure and high temperature and gradually was transformed into oil and gas.
Could you explain how you get oil from the ground and what process it goes through once it comes out?
The oil is contained in reservoirs deep below the surface of the earth. In Abu Dhabi, for example, many of the oil reservoirs are found at depths up to 2 miles below the surface.
That's deep.
And when I talk about a reservoir, I'm not talking about just a pool of oil.
Really?
The oil is actually contained in rock, in porous rock that the pore space, the holes in the rock, are filled with oil. Now these oil reservoirs are huge. Many of them in Abu Dhabi may be kilometers or miles in length. The oil contained in these reservoirs is at very high pressure. So in order to produce the oil, we drill a well from the surface. Now this might be a hole that's, say, 6 or 8 inches in diameter, drilled all the way down to the reservoir. Then we run a steel pipe into the ground, and that steel pipe allows the oil to flow then to the surface safely without escaping. Once it's produced to the surface, the oil then flows into a pipeline and to the refinery or to the oil export terminal.
About how much oil does the UAE produce each year?
Right now, the UAE is producing about 2.2 million barrels of oil per day.
Oh, wow.
That's over 90 million gallons of oil produced every day.
Now, how much of that oil is used here in the UAE, and how much of it is exported?
Most of it is exported because the country doesn't need all of the oil that they produce. So between the crude oil that's exported and the refined products that are exported, a little over 90% of the oil is exported.
How and where do you sell the oil that you produce here?
The oil that's produced in Abu Dhabi and exported is exported to many different countries, mostly in the Far East. Japan, for example, imports a lot of oil from Abu Dhabi. But other countries import oil from Abu Dhabi as well. For example, some of the European countries and even the United States may import some oil from Abu Dhabi.
How do government policies affect your company and oil resources in general?
Well, for the most part, the goals of the government when it comes to managing the natural resources are very much the same as the goals of the oil company. They want to preserve the environment. They want to ensure the health and safety of people who work in the petroleum industry. But in other ways, the government role is much different. For example, here in Abu Dhabi, the government controls the rate of oil production. That's not a decision left to the oil companies.
How has oil production affected where people live in the UAE?
If you went back in time before oil was discovered in Abu Dhabi, what you would find is that, not surprisingly, people tended to live wherever they could make a living. And so some people lived along the coast and were involved in the pearl industry. Others were involved in trade or fishing. And inland, many of the people who lived in this part of the world were nomads, and they traveled from one place to the other in order to find food and water. After oil, people tended to move to where the jobs were in producing the oil and refining it and exporting it.
How has the UAE benefited from the oil wealth?
The oil wealth in Abu Dhabi and in the United Arab Emirates, in my opinion, has been used very wisely. They have invested in developing other industries. They have spent considerable amount of the wealth on the health, the welfare of the people. And in that way, they've taken this oil wealth and they've used it very wisely to provide for future generations.
Oil has clearly had a tremendous impact on the United Arab Emirates. But what has oil meant to the people of the UAE? Don and I met two Abu Dhabi students, Nada Mokhtar and Abdul Rahman Al-Jabari, to talk about life here in the Emirates. And in this part of the world, talk and coffee go together. Has oil changed your guys' family at all to where how you're living, everything like that?
Yeah, well, oil has brought money into the country, which has therefore brought technology. So our everyday life has changed because we have computers and mobile phones and things like that.
Just all around technology.
Yeah.
I mean, if the oil, if they didn't find oil in this country, we wouldn't have any of this development here. It would have been just a barren desert with a few oases around and just camels and just the usual, stereotype desert.
What misconceptions do you think American teenagers would have about Emirati teenagers?
That we live in like tents and ride camels.
I mean, I'm always like whenever you're on the net on ICQ or any like chatter or anything, and you get people from the States, from Canada or Europe, they think it's like, what, do you have your camel parked outside or something? It's really not like that. It's actually more developed than a lot of nations in the world,
The UAE's oil wealth has been shared by all of the citizens of the country. That has made all native Emiratis relatively wealthy and has led to a need for foreign workers. In fact, the need has been so great that native Emiratis are now a minority in their own country. Foreign workers, many from other Islamic countries, are treated well here with good wages and benefits. There's virtually no unemployment and very little crime. The UAE has created a modern society in a desert. New homes, mosques, shopping centers, schools, and parks meet the needs of a growing population. Still, all parts of life are affected by our environment, and that includes recreation.
In the desert, you gotta make do with what you got, and when you wanna go boarding, it ain't snow, baby.
Zach, I've just got two words for you. Wipe out. Wait for me. Almost there.
Here you are, pretty pink. Paging for beauty.
Well, at least you'll cushion my fall. Good luck, Zach.
I don't think I'll need it. Look out below! Where do I buy my ski lift pass? Take only pictures,
Leave only footprints.
leave only sand.
Got a face print up there too, Zach.
Sand skiing is fun, but being in the desert really reminds you that there just isn't much water in this country. The amount of fresh water available from springs isn't enough for the drinking needs of the people. When Dawn and I stopped at a produce market to buy some fruit, we learned that though most of the UAE's food is imported, some fruits and vegetables are grown here, and that requires water. We saw water being used in many places to maintain the beautiful parks which are so common here. Water is also abundant in the unique fountains for which Abu Dhabi is famous. We talked to Khaled Al-Shahadat about the parks and plant life in the UAE and the use of water. So do the people of the UAE come to visit the parks often?
Yes, mostly for weekend.
Okay.
And government holiday. And the municipality, when anybody coming from outside, from the main entrance to the park, you find please keep the garden very clean.
Yeah.
And also don't throw the garbage in any place. They have a special place for garbage and a special place if you're going for barbecue.
So they take pride in their
Yes,
parks?
everything. They fix it, everything.
Good. You can tell.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're very beautiful.
Where do you get all this water to keep these areas so green?
For irrigation for bark or palm trees, actually they're using from water from WC, from bathroom.
Wastewater.
Yeah, wastewater. And they take for one small factory to put some chemical or something. You find, or they bring it by pipes to reaching to every place.
So the wastewater is recycled then?
Yes.
Okay.
What plants are native to the United Arab Emirates?
Only palm trees.
Only palm trees?
Yes, only palm trees. Yeah.
Wow.
Only palm trees because the weather is so hot and also the base it is very hot, sand. Really you find growing now it is trees for apple, for banana, for orange. You find, yes, here.
Really?
Yeah, it is really.
Really?
Yeah. And also agriculture you find cucumber, potatoes, and also meat, everything's growing here in this country.
Here in the desert?
Yes, in the desert. Yeah.
What are these pipes for, Khaled?
This is a pipe to reaching water to the palm trees. And this is, they have to keep, give him water twice in a day to keep him alive. And the costing really, each tree is monthly 1,000 dirham.
1,000 dirham per...
Monthly.
Wow.
That's expensive.
Now, is this the water from the water closet?
Yes, water from WC water.
Okay, so this is the recycled wastewater.
Wastewater, yeah.
The total area of the UAE is 32,000 square miles. In the entire country, there's a total of only 12 square miles of forest. So almost all the plant life you see here is a result of human effort. As communities expand into the desert, trees are planted and cared for, and that usually begins with tree-lined highways. Water. Water everywhere, and not a drop to drink. The United Arab Emirates used to have that problem being right here on the shores of the Arabian Gulf, some of the saltiest water in the region. But today, thanks to technology, some of that salt water is becoming fresh. How? For answers, let's head over to the Taweelah desalination plant. First of all, John, what is desalination? What does it do?
Okay, basically convert seawater into freshwater.
That simple.
That's that simple. The plants behind us, we've got 3 basic plants which you can see. 2 of the plants have been running for a number of years now. They produce approximately 100 million gallons a day. And the new plant, which is the one in the middle, it's 50 million gallons a day.
Does this plant meet the needs for the area?
Basically, it does produce, yes. I mean, all the time new plants are coming on stream, so it produces enough as of today. The future needs, they'll just keep building on more.
What did the people do in the city for fresh water before the plants were built?
Okay, prior to 1960, there were wells actually on Abu Dhabi Island in a place called Bateen, and they used to distribute the water on the backs of donkeys. It was as simple as that. Then in 1960, the first 12,500 gallon desalination plant was literally rolled off a raft on what is now today the Corniche.
Is desalination used worldwide?
Virtually every country you will find will have one, but certainly the Middle East by far is the greatest user. But it ranges from industrial use to domestic use, which is what you see here. But you'll find across in the States, you've got them in the States, you've got them on board ships, you've got them on oil rigs. So all these places use desalination plants.
We couldn't leave Abu Dhabi without visiting a souk. As in all Islamic countries, the center of the religious life is the mosque. The center of the social life is the souk, or market. This isn't just a place for business, although you can buy almost anything here. It's also a place to meet and find out what's happening in the community. We tried on some of the local clothes. I'm wearing the dish dash. But even if we couldn't exactly pass for Emiratis, we wanted to spend our last day here enjoying the desert the way people here have for generations, from Camelback.
I use it, Zach. You have.
Okay.
Whoa!
Ah, yeah.
Ride him, cowboy.
I got two.
Woohoo!
We're a little pampered right here with our stuff. He's got this blanket.
There's just something humbling and inspiring about traveling camel across the desert.
Just on this ride, I gained so much more respect for the people that live in this harsh environment.
I don't think I could ever do it.
The UAE is one of the wealthiest countries in the world. Most of that wealth comes from the oil industry, and it is used to benefit the whole country. The government, a federated monarchy, is using much of the country's $40 billion gross domestic product to strengthen and develop the UAE for its citizens. The desalination plant is one good example. Other examples include airports, shipping ports, modern housing, and large shopping malls. The future looks promising for this country. At present levels of usage, the oil reserves should last at least 100 years. And in case the world moves away from fossil fuels, such as petroleum, the UAE is working on other forms of industry. At the heart of it all is one fundamental truth. The UAE has an abundance of one valuable resource, oil, and a scarcity of another, water. This will always drive the policies of their government and dictate how the people live their lives. Well, with all the places we visited and the people we met, Dawn and I got some good answers to our original questions. And what were those questions again? How does the scarcity of an important natural resource affect people's daily lives? How is oil produced, distributed, and used? How have oil resources affected life in the United Arab Emirates? Who benefits from oil wealth in the UAE? And how do the policies of the UAE and other governments affect oil resources?